Former President George W. Bush senior advisor and a Fox Business contributor. Karl, we've seen so much out of the State Department and the Pentagon. We've even heard from the president in that interview with ABC News. Your reaction and sort of how you saw this 20 years ago versus what's happening now. Did you ever think it was going to end up like this?
No, and it didn't need to. President Biden said we had one mission in Afghanistan, and that was to get al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. That's not true. It was to remove Afghanistan as a possible safe haven for future terrorist acts. And for 20 years, we did that. But now we're going to turn Afghanistan back to the same people who willingly gave safe haven to al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and do so to other terrorist groups that hate the United States. The first Brit that was in that interview from London, Tom Tugendhat, he's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the British Parliament. He's also an Afghan war veteran. You can go online and see his speech of about 7 minutes, and it is a brilliant explanation of how bad this decision was, how badly executed this decision was, and how ignominious a defeat the United States has inflicted upon itself and its allies without consulting those allies. The Brits, the Germans, NATO itself, all of which had presence in Afghanistan.
Yeah, no, there definitely are issues, obviously, that we've been discussing with the execution of this exit. But also, as you point out, President Biden on Monday, when he gave his public remarks, he said that we were not there to nation build. Well, keeping a small presence of troops there wouldn't be nation building. As you said, it would be keeping stability within the region. And that really was what this was about. To me, I essentially look at this and say, oh, my God, you just handed this over to them. And now terrorism is going to flourish.
Yeah, I'd make 2 points. One is think how different the world would be if we got tired in Europe like in the 1950s or 60s and said we're coming back. The endless war. We're going to drop out of the European defense. You think Russia would have stood by? Even today, we are a necessary element to keep Russia from exerting influence over Europe. What if we come back from Korea, which is incidentally the longest U.S. unended war? We don't have a treaty ending the war in Korea. We have an armistice, a temporary truce. And what if we came? Does anybody think Asia would look the same way? And the second point I'd make is President Biden is being dishonest. I was there in 2001 and 2002 and 3 and 4 when he explicitly endorsed nation building in Afghanistan. So today he now says, oh, we only had one mission there. It leaves out an important second mission and then says, well, we could never nation build. Well, that's not what he said for the 8 years that I was in the White House. He was a supporter of nation building in Afghanistan because he understood with minimal resources over time we could end the threat of a safe haven in Afghanistan from which the attacks on 9/11 were launched.
Karl, while I have you, I just want to switch gears for a moment because you wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and you were talking about election reform in Texas. You were talking about the filibuster that made sure there was no vote. And when you broke it down, it really amazed me because what they were talking about was drive-through voting and 24-hour voting when actually there were so many measures in there that were positive with respect to expanding voting. What won't they do?
Well, what was interesting to me was the points about this was all about 24-hour voting and unlimited drive-through voting were made by the Democrat senator from Houston, who's a very respected member, Carol Alvarado. She said this is a systematic attack on our democracy. Well, we don't have unlimited drive-through voting in Texas. We say you can have drive-through voting if you can't get to the poll unassisted. We don't like the idea of packing a car with a bunch of people. Should the polling booth have 5 or 6 people in it? That's what a car can have. And we don't have 24-hour voting. In fact, no state in the country explicitly authorizes 24-hour voting, and no state in the country authorizes 24-hour voting. So my point in the article was, if this is an attack on democracy and, quote, voter suppression, when did the New York Times and the Washington Post and President Biden and Vice President Harris and President Obama and Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer all going to attack states like Illinois that explicitly don't allow 24-hour voting, or New York that explicitly doesn't allow 24-hour voting, or the state of Delaware, which doesn't allow drive-through voting or 24-hour voting? When are we going to hear the condemnation of voter suppression in those states?
Amazing. Karl Rove, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. You bet.